welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. You know, there's so much going on out in soybean fields, but I want to focus a little bit about our corn because we're starting to see some stalk rot issues where we're getting some lodging around the country. We're going to talk about stalk rots and what you can do about it.
Well, stalk rot is one of the things that farmers are talking about around the country, but another thing is what's new in terms of tiling. There have been some advancements lately. We're going to talk about some of those things today.
Well, we've got a weed of the week that's really pretty sticky if you happen to run into it this time of year. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we'll talk about crop canopy.
Okay, so we're out in these soybeans. It's early in the morning. There's a lot of dew on the beans, which is a good thing. We're happy to have dew when we're in a dry climate. But here's the problem. You know, we're trying not to get our pant legs all wet. So how do you get through here? Normally, that's a big issue because the beans have completely filled in the rows by now. We're in 30-inch rows on this particular field. But right now this year, these end rows, the canopy's open. We've got a 6-inch gap up the middle in some spots here. We're able to kind of weave through this field and really not get wet.
Okay, so Darren's talking about this like we don't want to get wet. We want to get soaked. Crop canopy is awesome. Here's what crop canopy does for a farmer. Number one, it helps control weeds. When the crop shades out the ground, that ground doesn't get sunlight. When the ground doesn't get sunlight, that means new weeds that are popping up don't get sunlight either. Then chances are they're going to die. So if we have a good thick crop canopy, then
chances
it
are
chokes out weeds.
they aren't going to germinate at all. They aren't even going to start growing because they don't think there's a possibility of good growth.
Yep. The other thing is late in the season, we're always starved for moisture, especially in the western corn belt. Well, with a thick crop canopy and less sun reaching the ground, there's less sunlight to mean that water is going up in the air for us. We're going to lose less water. If we have a tight crop canopy, it seems to trap moisture down in there. Well, that's also a good thing.
I look at it just a little bit different. You talk about moisture preservation, but I like to get that canopy completely closed because I want to catch all the sunlight energy that we can. That's where we're getting our yield potential from. The faster we can catch all that sun, and if we can catch 100% of the sun that hits our field, most years, if you have a little bit of moisture, we're going to have fantastic yields. So I know when our canopy fills in, it's a good thing for us. The other thing that I really like too, Brian, that goes along with crop canopy that's important for me is when you're looking at a soybean plant, you want to produce the most soybeans that you can. Well, how do you do that? With one stem that's tall? Well, there's only so many nodes on that stem, so many places where a branch comes out and pods are going to hang off. But if I've got a bushy bean where I'm going to have so many more nodes out there and more potential pods, I like it for that reason too. So there's a lot of things about crop canopy that are big positives for crop production and for farmers.
Okay, the negative side though is because we've trapped all that moisture, that means that we have a much better environment for diseases to get started. So we'll typically see diseases like white mold, for example, in great big crop. In other words, soybeans that got big and had canopy real early in the season. If you want to have fewer diseases, have a little less crop canopy.
Well, okay, let's talk about that because there's a couple of things going on there. One, you don't have much air movement, and that you'll very quickly find out. If you walk out into a field, if you haven't been on a farm before or you haven't been in a field for a long time and you've kind of forgotten this, just walk out into a field of some soybeans that are waist high or bigger. It's really warm and humid underneath that canopy, which is a perfect environment for disease. Now, when you don't have that thick crop canopy, you let a little bit of sunlight get in. And you think about it just like in your house. If you've got a room that stays really dark all the time and is humid, like down in the basement, for example, that's a prime condition for mold and other fungus to develop. The same thing happens out in your crop. If you're not letting any sunlight or breeze get underneath that canopy, you've got a great environment for mold or disease.
With crop canopy, you might make the argument that, well, we've got a better home for certain bugs. I don't know if that's really true or not, but the point is if I go out there and I spray anything, whether it's a fungicide, an insecticide, or a herbicide, I can't get good spray coverage on the target that I'm after if I have a huge crop canopy there. So that's why we want to control all those things if we can, just a little bit earlier in the season before we have that big crop canopy.
Well, we're talking about pros and cons of crop canopy. Really, the biggest thing is we want to close that canopy. We want to choke any other weed competition out. We want to catch all the sunlight we can and preserve moisture. And 9 times out of 10, that's going to lead to the most yield potential possible. So when we talk about crop canopy, it's in a positive light. We want to have good crop canopy.
Yep, and another thing we want in our fields is good weed control, especially if we've got our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Whether you're feeding cattle, milking cows, or baling hay, the work on your farm is never done, which is why you need equipment that works as hard as you do. Get the efficiency and versatility you need with Case IH. From farm-all compact and utility tractors to balers and mowers, all Case IH equipment is designed with one thing in mind: getting the job done. To learn more, visit caseih.com/livestock.
Honey wagon? Can the sweet talk. Out here we treat manure, and when we talk treats, we don't mean cupcakes. Treating manure with More Than Manure Nutrient Manager can reduce solids in your pit or lagoon and ammonia levels in confinement buildings. PU, try N and P. MTM is the first and only nutrient manager proven to reduce nitrogen loss and phosphorus lockup. That's fertilizer loaded with yield potential. Looking for proof? Check the bin. Isn't that sweet? Results you can't ignore, a pit you finally can.
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
Micronutrients are not optional for plants, they are essential. TJ Micromix is a profit-proven management tool that ensures the availability of essential secondary and micronutrients. Formulated as a dry granule or liquid, TJ Micromix is plant available, easy to mix and apply. The synergistic fertilizer mix delivers consistent yield response on a variety of crops by complementing an NPK fertilizer program. Maximize yield on your farm this season. Call TJ Technologies or your fertilizer dealer and get your TJ Micromix today.
Capello corn headers are designed for producers who expect more. Expect more grain in your bin. Expect an industry-leading 2-year manufacturer's warranty. Expect Capello-designed chopping and folding options that save you time and money. And whether red, green, or yellow, expect row size options that fit your operation because all producers deserve the best. Expect Capello. It's a head above the rest.
What better place to talk about stalk rot in corn than a soybean field, right?
Well, absolutely. We've got last year's stalk still out in the field and still decomposing. And if you look in a soybean field after a corn rotation, you can look and see a lot of the different diseases forming out in those stalks. This is one of the reasons that we like to have crop rotation, so we don't have these diseases right there present in a cornfield where they're just going to jump right back into a corn plant. We've got a broadleaf crop out here, and a lot of times the diseases that impact a broadleaf crop may be a little bit different than the diseases that impact a grass crop like corn.
Yep, but the problem is, since most farmers have gone to reduced tillage over the years, there are still some corn stalks that are left out here from last year, and there'll probably be a few left going into the next year when corn is raised back here again. So when you're looking at something like this, you're much more likely to have diseases show up in corn when you've still got corn residue out there.
Well, it's really important to look at stalk rot from a standpoint of when does it really get started in my plants. Now, a lot of farmers will say, well, I didn't see anything tipping over in my field till right at the end of the season. Or, you know, right now in August, I'm seeing some spongy stalks out there, and I know I've got a little bit of stalk rot getting started. No, it started a long time ago. It started with an infection in the root system very early in the season, and it's just now fully manifesting itself throughout your stalk. So hopefully, you know, if you're seeing some spongy stalks, you can make it to harvest without things lodging and tipping over in your field. but you have to start with your management very early in the season. So if you're noticing things now, make your plans for next year.
All right, so let's talk about this year. If you're right now identifying some of these stalk rot issues, that's the key. We want you out scouting your fields. If you do identify these stalk rot issues, let's say it's now or September, whenever, you identify them, now what do you do?
Okay, so you find a hybrid or a field that you've got a stalk rot issue. You've just got to watch that throughout the rest of the season, keep an eye on it, and then schedule that field to be harvested first. I realize, you know what, you've got a problem out in that field and that corn may be a little wetter than you would like, but you may have to get out there a week or two early rather than letting that plant fully cannibalize, fully dry out and get all the way to harvest, because by that time it may be falling all over the place and you might end up driving 1 mile an hour with your combine going one way through the field.
All right, then the next step is, how do you prevent this from happening next year?
Well, okay, let's talk about crop rotation first of all. We kind of hit on that just a little bit. If you've got some big time stalk rot issues, rotate away from corn for a while. You have to get away for at least a year. Plant a broadleaf crop, maybe it's soybeans, maybe it's something else depending on where you're at, and just try and get out of that disease cycle. Now, if you're in a system where you can do some tillage, that can certainly help. We talked about how in reduced tillage, like we're doing on our farm, if you've got a problem, it can be a little tougher to fight. If you can do some tillage, get everything cleaned up, get rid of some of that residue, get it broken down out in your field, that could be a good thing for you too. The next thing you will consider is using a seed treatment. Now, most corn that you're going to get is going to come with a seed treatment on it. But do pay attention to that. If there's another level of seed treatment that you can buy, some companies have got another step up if you want to pay just a little bit more. That may not be a bad thing for you. The other thing you can do is put some fungicide right in the furrow. Maybe it's with your starter fertilizer or maybe it's separate, but just put something in the furrow like a headline or another product, and you could have something else in there, another mode of action to try and fight some more disease.
Here's the other thing I always like to hit on, fertility. If you don't have a good balanced fertility program, you're going to have issues with stalk rot and a whole bunch of other things out there. So make sure you have a lot of fertility, and potassium is probably the leading cause of stalk issues, lack of potassium. So make sure you have that taken care of.
If your plants aren't being fed, if you're not getting the right fertility program out there or getting the right balance of nutrients out there for your plants, chances are if there is a disease present in your field, which there's always a disease present out there, you're going to be that host for that disease plant that you just can't fight it off. So make sure you're getting that fertility program right and doing everything you can to minimize other stresses in your field.
Like weeds and insects, make sure those are under control too.
And also, things like soil pH, that's a big thing too. But just check through your field, talk with your agronomist, see, hey, here's my soil test, here's my plant tissue analysis, here's what's going on in my field. Let's figure out why I'm having disease problems when right across the road I'm not.
Well, we mentioned weeds there, and if weeds are a problem in your field, you may have more issues. Our Weed of the Week could be the culprit. We'll talk about how to control it on your farm coming up later in the show.
At Titan Machinery and Case IH, we offer better solutions for all your production needs. It's more than our job, it's who we are. We are parts. We are service. We are training. And most importantly, we are here for you. In any season, for every reason, we've got you covered. Case IH and Titan Machinery, better solutions.
You expect a lot from this seed, and as it grows through each stage of development, Agriculture Liquid Fertilizers is there, feeding your crop exactly what it needs when it needs it. So no matter how you fertilize, no matter when, AgroLiquid efficiently brings all the nutrients your crop needs for a great harvest. From 1 kernel in the ground to 600 on the ear. For better yields and better quality, Agriculture Liquid Fertilizers.
Upgrade your trailer to electric with the Rolltech electric system from AgriCover. Strong, flexible pivot arms and motor mount rotate and telescope, allowing the roll tube to rise and flex over heaped loads. The positive automatic lock is impossible to back off to control the flow of grain. This integrated system uses one wireless remote to operate up to 10 tarps and hoppers, keeping your driver out of the dust, rain, and harm's way. See the Rolltech system in action at an AgriCover dealer near you.
Wake up, breakfast is served. Your roots crave P. Most of your applied P gets tied up in the soil, a natural phenomenon known as phosphorus fixation. Fix the problem with Avail Phosphorus Fertilizer Enhancer. Avail makes more P available to your roots. Here, here, and here. Increasing P availability can lead to increased P uptake in the plant. That's more P, and more P. More phosphorus for your crop can mean more results in your bin. An average of 9.6 bushels per acre of corn. Breakfast is served. Supercharge your P with Avail.
Well, Brian, we're gonna take a chance here. I know we've only got a half an hour show, but we're gonna open up the door for one of Brian's favorite topics on our farm. It's drain tile.
Well, the reason why I get so excited about this tiling thing is we've had such good success with this, and farmers all over the country have, because as we've talked about for years and years, drainage is the most important thing to raising good crops. If you don't have good drainage, you are not going to raise a good crop. I don't care what other things you do. So you've got to get this thing under control. But today we wanted to focus on what new things are there in terms of tiling that you might consider for your farm going into this next season.
You know, one of the things that we get a lot of questions about, especially in the Western Corn Belt, is can I actually sub-irrigate back through my tile lines? And the answer to that is yes, you can. I mean, it certainly takes some planning on the front side. It's going to take some extra equipment and this kind of thing, but it can be done. The problem with it, or the challenge with it, is it's going to cost a little bit of money. It's not completely cheap. It's not like, well, I've got these tile lines out there that are at 50 or 100 foot spacings. I'm just going to start pumping water back through and everything's going to be great out in my field. But you end up with a field that's very uneven. So when you're doing that, when you're going to do some sub-irrigation, you've got to move those lines a lot closer together. So when you're planning your system out, maybe your lines are at 20 feet apart or something like that. It'll just depend on what type of soil you have and how much water movement you can get through the soil, but you can actually put water back out under the ground. It's a good thing for many ways in that it takes a lot less water than it does to irrigate over the top when you have to deal with things like heat and sun and all these things going on that are going to help make that water evaporate and be less efficient.
If you're going to do this sub-irrigation though, you're going to have what we call drainage water management systems. In other words, just shut-offs at the end of your tile lines. And it might not just be at the end, it might be halfway in your tile line. It all depends on slope. In other words, if you have a very flat field, you can probably get by with one shut-off at the end of the field. If you have some slope out there, you might need 2, 3, even 4 shut-offs in the field as you go up that slope. We just need to be able to stop the water at that point so the water can filter out of the tile line.
Well, the big question when you're thinking about irrigating back through those tile lines is, where's the water going to come from? Do you have to have a holding pond? Do you have to have a well? You know, what kind of system does it take to get water back in those lines?
Yeah, well, it could be either one of those things. It's just, if you're going to have a holding pond, it's going to have to be a really big holding pond, because don't forget that just 1 acre inch of water is 27,154 gallons. So that's a lot of water if you want to put very much back through the system. But it could be a holding pond in combination with a well. That's another thing that you may consider doing. Our whole point with this sub-irrigation thing is just we've had a lot of questions about it. We want you to know it's definitely possible. Just talk to a tiling expert in your area and they can maybe help you out with that.
One thing we're doing on our farm is we're monitoring that water, we're testing it, we're looking to see if there are nutrients in there, and then we're trying to fix that if there are any nutrients. For example, if you're thinking about, well, I may have some nitrate coming out of that water because nitrate can leach, and like this spring, for example, we had some big time rains. It may have pushed some nitrogen down. I wonder how much came out the tile lines. Well, we've put in a bioreactor on one of our outlets where the water actually moves through a bunch of wood chips to try and filter out any nitrate. And we took some readings this spring in conjunction with South Dakota State University, and we actually saw that, yeah, there was a little bit of nitrate. We went to that biodigester or bioreactor, and we took out that nitrate, and the water coming out the end was absolutely pure.
All right, so as soon as Darren talks about absolutely pure. Let's just make this clear. There is absolutely no water that's 100% pure.
Even bottled water, you're allowed to have up to 10 parts per million of nitrate. And we look at our river that flows relatively close to our farm, right along some of our fields, and the water there has like 1 part per million of nitrate in it, or maybe 2 at the most. It's very low. And the water coming out of our drainage tile, we've never seen exceed drinking water standards for nitrate.
In the United States now, phosphorus is the #1 water quality issue that we've got, and phosphorus doesn't move in soil. So when a farmer puts it down at 6 inches deep, let's say, it stays right there. It's not dropping down into the tile line. It's not going out with tile water. So how does phosphorus ever get into water if it doesn't leach through the soil? Well, the reason it gets there is soil erosion. And it's a proven fact that when you put tile in your ground, you're going to have less soil erosion. So this is one of the things I always tell people, you're going to have way better downstream water quality when you put tile in, as opposed to when you don't have tile in, because you're going to have a lot less erosion, you're going to have a lot less phosphorus that's ending downstream.
Well, our one potential problem, Brian, is where we have surface inlets, and that's something that many farmers are working on across the country. Is, you know what, that's the way we used to do things. We'd put surface inlets in kind of a low area of the field to try and get water out of there and save our crop. Now what farmers are doing, since many farmers are putting in drain tile themselves, they're just putting in more lines. Maybe those tile lines are only 10 feet apart, maybe they're a little more shallow than normal. But if you put a whole bunch of tile lines in those low areas, you could actually take out that surface inlet and do almost as well, yet still get that water to filter down through the soil and take out impurities like the phosphorus that could potentially wash right into a surface inlet.
One more thing, now that farmers have modern technology like GPS, they don't have to use lasers anymore, so they're much more accurate with this GPS, and really good tile plows, so they can put tile in very accurately at 3 feet deep. They don't need to go down to 4 or 5 or 6 feet deep like a lot of farmers used to do. At 3 feet deep, you don't take nearly as much water out of the field. There's not nearly as much going downstream. We're preserving more for the farmer. All we're doing is lowering the water table to 3 feet to give our crops good room to grow.
Well, you know, just like everything else going on in agriculture, drainage tile is changing. Every year you need to keep up with what's new, what's going on, what new techniques are being done, what new equipment there is, because there are things that can be improved on your farm. Even if your drainage tile has been in for many years and is working just fine, there's still some tweaks that can be done to get more out of it. Well, one other thing that you'll want to be watching every year in your field is for our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to control this tough weed coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
You work to protect your farm's legacy and to keep it going. Introducing the Enlist Weed Control System, an advanced herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate for exceptional control of tough weeds. The next chapter begins.
Our Weed of the Week is Cocklebur.
This used to be one of the toughest weeds when we were growing up and walking a lot of beans. Like this field right here, we'd walk this field and we'd see these big, slightly lighter color green leaves, and it was Cocklebur every time. And when we look at Cocklebur, the big confusion that we would have at that time in our lives was, well, is it a sunflower or is it a Cocklebur? And when you think of the difference, when you grab onto the stem, you'll see it right away. With sunflower, it's really rough and abrasive with long hairs. With Cocklebur, it looks kind of like a leopard print up the stem, lots of black spots on it. And then, of course, when the seed comes out, it's very clear that this is Cocklebur because chances are it's going to stick all over your clothes.
Well, fortunately, we have much better ways to control it than we used to, because growing up, pulling it was the very best way, unfortunately, in soybeans.
Well, it helped us develop strong backs, Brian. That was a good thing, and a good work ethic,
yeah.
Right?
But anyway, when we talk about soybeans today, yeah, we used to have metribuzin or Sencor, and we still have that today, so that's one thing you can do. It's not that great, but you could add Python to it, and that will improve the control.
Well, pre-emerge would be nice, but chances are this seed is so big and it could germinate from about 6 inches deep. So even if you're doing tillage out there and say, well, I'm just going to bury those seeds so I don't see them again, they can still pop up. And if you've got something that can germinate from 6 inches deep, there's no pre-emerge program that's going to be perfect on it ever. We've always been looking for that silver bullet in soybeans. What's the one thing I can spray and it's all over? I remember when Pursuit Plus came out and guys said, wow, this is fantastic. I don't have anything coming through except cockleburs and sunflowers. And those weeds that have great big seeds are just tough to fight. So when we're looking post-emergent soybeans, when we were kids, Basagran was, well, that was the best product that we had, and it was pretty
It's not that
iffy.
good. We also used to use Classic and Pinnacle a lot. Today it'd be Classic plus Harass if you want to do that. But I think First Rate is definitely better, so that's the way I'd go.
Well, also Pursuit and Raptor do have some decent activity if you can use those in your rotation.
All right, real quickly, in corn, what do you think the best thing down
Well, in
is?
corn pre-emerge, I like Balance Flex, but again, it's not perfect.
Verdict's probably just as good though. That Sharpen, especially if you go with the higher rate, good product. Post-emerge, probably Status, otherwise Callisto, Loudus, Impact are decent, and old Buctril-atrazine will work just fine. In wheat, Sharpen's the best pre, and post-emerge, I'd probably run with Husky.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's weed, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
What are farmers doing to feed the planet? They're using Quadtrek technology, soil management, and planting systems from Case IH to foster a better growing environment that maximizes yield potential. Visit caseih.com to be ready.
Eliminating the green bridge between wheat crops is critical, but how should you set up your sprayer? We'll discuss on today's Iron Talk. Burn down applications following a wheat crop often involve Roundup plus either dicamba or 2,4-D. With all of these products, physical drift is a concern, and with the dicamba and 2,4-D, we're also worried about the potential volatility. Controlling droplet size is important, and using turbo T-jet or air induction nozzles or the like is advised. Keeping spray volume towards the lower side keeps droplets concentrated with product, which improves control when weeds are small. When weeds are bigger, this may not be as much of a concern because you can land more product on them. Keeping ground speed down to 15 miles an hour or less is important to minimize drift as well. Finally, keeping your boom height low is critical to minimize drift potential. Depending on your nozzles, spray pattern, and weed height, you should aim for your boom to be no more than 2 feet above the crop. Follow all these guidelines and your burn down application will be more effective on the weeds and less likely to affect anything outside your field. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show. If you want to take your farm to the next level, you have to go where the in-field research is being done. Hi, I'm Darren Hefty with Ag PhD TV. One of the field tours that Brian and I have enjoyed the most each summer is the North Central Research Station Tour in Michigan. There are over 500 acres of replicated trials in corn, soybeans, wheat, and numerous other crops. You'll learn more about crop fertility in a few hours than most farmers will in a decade. Visit agroliquid.com for all the details, and maybe we'll see you there.
Whether you're feeding cattle, milking cows, or baling hay, the work on your farm is never done, which is why you need equipment that works as hard as you do. Get the efficiency and versatility you need with Case IH. From farm-all compact and utility tractors to balers and mowers, all Case IH equipment is designed with one thing in mind: getting the job done. To learn more, visit caseih.com/livestock.
What's new for 2013? Challenge 2050. Challenge 2050 is a two-component system consisting of a nutrient and a biological additive. This groundbreaking fertilizer contains mycorrhizal fungi, which provide an extended transport system that allows water and nutrients to be delivered directly into the root. Challenge 2050 can increase yield and efficiency of your standard fertilizer program. Challenge 2050 is the future of fertilizer. Call TJ Technologies or your fertilizer dealer and get Challenge 2050 today.
For years, FarmLogic has been the easiest and most convenient way to keep up with your farming operations. Well, it just got better. Introducing FarmPad for your phone. You always have your phone with you, so entering records as they happen is as easy as a touch of a button. Chemical database, GPS, service records, and more. When you do it on the farm, save it on your phone and it's backed up forever. Call or visit farmlogic.com for a free trial and find out why FarmLogic is the best decision tool for the farm.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
The all-new S-Cube commercial tender is the only tender on the market with poly tanks, giving you the capability to haul seed, fertilizer, water, or liquid fertilizer. Each cube can hold 300 units of seed, 2,000 gallons of liquid, or 300 cubic feet of fertilizer. Options include full functioning wireless remote, stainless steel conveyors, and self-contained hydraulics. Get yours today at Norwood Sales.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's show, but be sure to tune in again next time for another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.